Hello, my name is Vera V, and welcome to the 23rd episode of my podcast, Stories by Vera V. I'm so incredibly excited to have you here. So, for 2022, I set myself a goal of reading one book per week. And these are all the books I read in January. So, I'll be talking about them. I love book content. I don't know if you do, but I absolutely do. So, buckle up, buttercup, and get ready for a ride of a lifetime. Yay-haw! Yeehaw. Interesting stories by interesting people. Stories by Vera V. If I'm being blunt honest with you, I'll just say this right now. These are not all the books I read. I read 5, and there are 5 here, but I actually borrow books from a library because I don't know why, but I hate the notion of physically owning things. I don't really like it. The less I own physically, the better, because then, I don't know, I really like the minimalistic lifestyle, and I really aspire to reach that at some point. However, before we get into the book content, which I just can't stress this enough. I love hearing people talk about books for whatever reason. It's just so fascinating to me. Before we get into that, I just have one request to make. If you're listening to this on Spotify and or on Apple Podcasts, hopefully you listen to each episode more than once. You know what I'm saying? Please give my podcast, Stories by Vera V, a rating and or a review, preferably both. So the way you do it on Apple Podcasts is that you just click on my podcast and you scroll all the way down. There's stars there. Click 5. No, I'm just kidding. Whatever suits you best. Hopefully it's 5. If you're on Spotify, scroll all the way up, go to my show, Stories by Vera V, scroll all the way up and give it 5. I'm just kidding. At the moment, I think I have 387 reviews or so. Let's get that to an angel number, 444. Yeah? I'm just kidding. Anyway, I'm just happy with anything. I just want to hear your feedback. That is all. So now, let's get into the book content. Gosh, I'm excited for this. I haven't talked about books on my channel, on my podcast, maybe ever, really. But lately I've been getting more into reading. So I have notes on my phone just so I don't miss anything, because some books, they have very intricate details and points I'd like to touch upon. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. So regarding books and why I started reading, I think I really started reading, well, in 2022, just because I got inspired by all the book channels I watch. And I watch quite a bunch. It's just people talking about books I know I'll never read in my lifetime. Like even romance novels. Do I read them? Not really. But do I love hearing people talk about them? Yes. Yes. I listen. I could watch book videos for a month straight, and I'm not joking about that. I really could. Just leave me in a room alone in the dark. Turn on the computer with book videos and I'll watch it. I'll be thoroughly entertained. I just love hearing people talk about books. But the great thing about this podcast episode is that I'll also be sharing the moral lessons I've acquired from each and every one. So there's some benefit in that as well. I can't stop doing the Debbie Ryan thing. If you're watching this as a video cast, I just can't stop. Can't stop. Won't stop. Beat drop. I'm so excited. Regarding books, I'll be just talking about them and giving a synopsis of each and every one. And regarding spoilers, I'm going to try not to spoil it, but I think spoiling a book is kind of impossible, because if you know the ending, that doesn't spoil the experience of reading it, which is the whole point of reading, to consume a work in its entirety. So for me, whatever book I start, I pretty much finish, except for one. I started one and I haven't finished yet, but I will. I'm committed to everything I do, hopefully. So to start off, the first book I read, I started it December 27th. Oh, by the way, I also have a Goodreads. If you want to search it up, my name is Vera V. And it's also linked in my Instagram bio and in my podcast. There's like a bio site thing, that link, click it. My Goodreads is there. And I have all my reviews there and ratings and whatnot. So yeah, it's all jolly and fun. So the first book I read, I started reading it on December 27th. The Beautiful and Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So why did I choose to read it? That's a good question. Thank you for asking. Typically, I don't read literature. Not as much as I have read nonfiction in the past, which is really ironic because this month, out of 5 books, I've only read 1 nonfiction book. Crazy, huh? And it was also an autobiography. So I guess things change. It's 2022. What can I say? Regarding literature, though, I read it for the sole purpose of expanding my lexicon and my vocabulary, because as a singer-songwriter, words matter a great deal to me. You're going to hear my first song very soon if you follow me on this journey, which I hope you do. I'm releasing it soon. I'm recording it soon. And I'm taking you with me. All right. Believe that. And the words in that song, in my song, my very first song that I'm releasing into the world, they're very important to me. And to me personally, I find that it reads like poetry. So I take a great deal in an author's eloquence when writing. And F. Scott Fitzgerald, he's an American author, one of the most famous ones. Like, you can't go wrong with F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is why I chose to read The Beautiful and Damned. Regarding other works I've read by him, I've read The Great Gatsby, which I'm sure you've heard of because it's one of his most most famous books. I mean, all his books are, but The Great Gatsby, everybody's heard of it. We've read it in school as well. With this book, however, I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. And let me explain. The genre is a tragedy, and it's his second novel. It follows his debut novel, which was considered to be one of his greatest works of art. Besides The Great Gatsby, it's like the second best, based on what I read. And this novel, The Beautiful and Damned, it's considered to be a quite poor work of art. Some critics say it's rushed and whatnot, and I found that to be quite an interesting perspective. So it follows the life of Anthony Patch and his wife Gloria and their reckless marriage as they await inheritance from Anthony's grandfather Adam Patch, because he's loaded, for lack of a better word. And what I liked about the book is the dialogue. I think that was Fitzgerald's strongest point, the dialogue, and obviously the way that the book is written. I'll admit at the beginning when I was reading it, I was quite confused, because obviously it's written a while back, but just some of the words, they were beautiful, right? But I had to look up a lot of definitions, I'll tell you that. And actually, because of the book, The Beautiful and Damned, I started keeping a words list, which is just a list of vocabulary, and I would define it and I'd write it down. So now that list is quite extensive after the 5 books I read. 2 of them were exceptionally great, vocabulary-wise. Gosh, this makes me want to study etymology. I just love words so much. But what I liked about this book, as I mentioned prior, is the dialogue. And also, what I was thinking, this book really got me thinking. There's an introduction for it written by, I'm not sure whom, but it's talking about how some of the book's moments, they parallels the author's own personal life. And I think that's very interesting how people do that. It makes you wonder, because obviously, I'll tell you this right now. I have my first song coming soon, right? And I'm really excited to release it. And it's a work of art, so it's a thing of its own. But obviously, there's a lot in it drawn from my own life and from my own experience and from my own emotions. So in a sense, it came to me, but it didn't just come to me, you know? I'm very much an author of it. So the same thing with the book and with the characters. And I think what's very interesting is that there's this one character, Gloria Patch, right? She's the wife of Anthony Patch. And in the introduction, it was said that Fitzgerald drew a lot of inspiration for that character, Gloria, from his own wife, Zelda, which I think is just very interesting. But that book, basically, its strongest point is just, besides dialogue, it's just detailing into the deterioration of characters. It's called The Beautiful and Damned for a reason. They're beautiful, they're rich, but at the same time, they're damned. It also raises the idea of how, what's it like living a life when a person doesn't have any meaning, right? They become depressed. It's quite obvious. And I feel like this book really portrays that. And so for me, I've graduated high school 3 weeks ago, right? So in a sense, I've kind of lost meaning in my own life just because it's been such a long and extensive chapter of my life. 11 and a half years I've been going to school. And if you're listening to this, chances are you're probably in school or you just finished it, you know? You're young, like me. Even if not, that's cool too. I respect you, whoever you are. Thank you for listening. That's all I can say. But point is, I've also feel like I've lost some of my meaning. And that book was just a reminder to find it again, you know? And lately I've been feeling a little bit sad, a little bit of malaise here and there. It's a word I learned from The Beautiful and Damned. Malaise is unhappiness. No, it's actually a word I learned from another book I read. But it's unhappiness without a specific cause, like you don't know what's causing it. Malaise. That's how I've been feeling the past few weeks upon graduating high school, because having a meaning, I feel like, is very important, and leading life with meaning, because that's what leaves a person fulfilled. And that's what I think is a great contributor to one's happiness. So that was the first book, and 3 out of 5 stars, because some of the moments were it was just a little hard to read in some parts, and it definitely did feel like an imperfect work of art. There are a lot of structures combined into it. Some points it read like a play, some it was just dialogue between characters, some it was descriptions, you know, but I feel like it wasn't really entirely cohesive. That's what I would say. So next book I read is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and I finished that book. I didn't start it in school, but I finished it in school. Why? Because school was incredibly time inefficient. Thus, I graduated early. Yes, that's exactly why I did that. So for Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, if you don't know about David Goggins, shawty, I got something to spill. I gave that book 4 out of 5 stars because for what the book is meant to represent and meant to be, I feel like it does a pretty good job at doing that. That's why I rate books. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just how I do it. So that book, it's geared toward audience that It's not entirely into literature, if that makes sense. So it's written simply, and that makes sense, right? So 4 out of 5 stars, 80%. That's a good rating. So it's a autobiography, and it's a story of David Goggins, who was describing his transformation from being a young, poor, depressed, overweight man into becoming one of the world's greatest endurance athletes. And by that, I mean running marathons of hundreds of miles. Yeah. If I can say anything about David Goggins, is that he's a hard man. Have I heard about him before reading this book? Yes, which is why I decided to read it. This book is actually one I own, but it's not my copy. It's my dad's, because my younger sister gave that for New Year's to my dad's. I don't celebrate Christmas. I celebrate New Year's because I'm Russian, but that's just the way it is. So no, it's not my copy of the book, but I took it and I read it, and that's that. It also read very quick, which was, well, that's just what the book was supposed to be, so it makes sense. And regarding that, I think there are two ways to look at this book, right? So David Goggins, he coined, I'm pretty sure, some phrases that they use in the military or something like, stay hard, embrace the suck. Stay hard, embrace the suck, right? And if I can say anything about David Goggins, is that he's a hard man. He's probably the hardest man on earth. But there are two ways to interpret this book. You can interpret it as a self-help book or as an autobiography. And there is a clear distinction between the two, because if you're interpreting it as a self-help book, you're going to want to apply everything in it to your own life. And if it's an autobiography, you just take what kind of clicks with you, if that makes sense. And so for me personally, I would definitely recommend to interpret it as an autobiography, because some points in it, personally, I just didn't find healthy. And I'll give you an example. So during one of the, how for Navy SEALs, there's Hell Week. And that's a week where it's honestly like self-inflicting psychological warfare on each one of the trainees. And they don't sleep, like, pretty sure at all. They have intense and very rigorous training for endurance and strength and literally everything and anything you can imagine. It's really hard. So for David Goggins, during one of the Hell Weeks that he's gone through, P.S., he's gone through 3, which is, I'm pretty sure, unheard of. I don't know if anyone else has done that. 3 Hell Weeks, right? Or maybe it was 2.5. Who cares? That's quite a bit. Anything bigger than 0 is a lot for a Hell Week. So during one of them, he had broken legs and he would just tape them up and still run on them. Is that healthy? No. That's how I view things. Is he a hard man for that? Yes. Is that healthy? No. Would I run on broken legs? No. So I feel like in that book, he almost, with all due respect, and I really do respect David Goggins, he's one of my biggest, I think, inspirations, but to an extent. He's kind of crazy. Mans is crazy. With all due respect, Sir Goggins, you're kind of crazy for that. Because some things he describes, it's just, I don't know what the motivation behind that is. And I think it really crosses over. It's one thing to be mentally tough, right? And to challenge yourself constantly on a consistent basis. But it's a whole other thing to inflict punishment on yourself. And that's what he's been doing, I feel like, for the majority of the book. And at the end, read the ending, he says so. He says how he's been torturing or punishing his own body for all these years. And his punished and tortured body was his greatest achievement or something like that. And after that, he started stretching. So this book is meant to be taken in its entirety. So that's how I would recommend reading it. But regarding that, that's not a mindset I personally agree with. Personally, when I train, and there was a time period when I would train 2 times a day, right? Obviously not with the intensity that Goggins trains with, because, well, I have quite different goals than he does, but mad respect for him. But it was not to punish myself or to inflict pain on myself or to make myself sore. I like the feeling of having sore legs because I worked for it, but it's more as to open up opportunities for myself to be stronger, faster, more disciplined, I just look at it differently. But honestly, whatever helps him, because the first chapter is called I Should Have Been a Statistic. That's the way he perceives himself. And honestly, it's amazing and very inspiring to see how far a person can go. And I'm just happy for him. So yeah, that book was 4 out of 5 stars. And what I also liked in that book is that at the end of every chapter, there are 12, I'm pretty sure. There's a challenge. And that's what's actually applicable to the average regular person. That's not as uncommon amongst uncommon. Be uncommon amongst uncommon. That's a quote from him. My dad and I, we're big fans of David Goggins. And I think his name is heard more in our household than probably any other name. So that's how it be sometimes. But yeah, this book, I would recommend it. 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Suicide by Edouard Levé. That's a book translated from French. And I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So that's actually quite funny. That's a book I finished in one day. one day while I was at school. Why? Oh, we've been over this because schools in California, public high school, the one that I went to, time inefficient. So I just finished this book in one day. To be fair though, it's 128 pages. It's very short. It is. That's just how it be sometimes. I think it's the first book that I ever ordered because I don't think I've ever ordered anything else ever. I've never purchased a book except for that one. Because here's a rant. 128 pages, right? Guess how much it was worth on Amazon? $20. $20 or maybe 15. I don't know. I don't remember at this point. But I know that was expensive. For what it's worth, it was expensive. And it was not in a library. By the way, how come there aren't that many books at libraries? Gosh. I want to read some and they're just not in libraries, so I'm going to have to purchase them. And there's also, life hack, there's this website called thriftbooks.com. I did not tell you about this, but I absolutely did. Thriftbooks.com. They have books for cheap. Don't buy books from Amazon. Buy it from thriftbooks.com. They're so much cheaper there if you want to own physical copies. I don't. But for the next books that I'm going to read, I'm probably going to buy from there. But that book, Suicide by Edouard Levé, was it on thriftbooks.com? No. I had to order it off of Zamazon. Zamazon. So that's what I did. So 3 out of 5 stars. It's a fictional novel. And before we get into it, I just want to warn you, this is a heavier topic because I'm going to be discussing suicide. That's what the book is about. So it's said to be a public suicide note almost of the author because he committed it a week after handing the manuscript of this novel to his publisher. So that's kind of the description of it that I read online. And regarding the synopsis, it is the investigation into the suicide of the author's fictional friend, right? But it's said to be an actual friend of his who I think committed when he was 25 years old or so. And what I found very interesting, and this is a book unlike anything else I've ever read before. I wish I could read it in French because I think it's such a honor, almost, I don't know, a literary honor to be reading books in their original text without have it be translated. Because obviously things get lost in translation. Like I'll give you an example. In Russian, there are 2 words for blue. There's light blue and then there's dark blue. And those are completely different things. And there's been research that shows that because that's a thing in Russia and that's part of the culture, that Russian people recognize the different hues and shades of blue more easily or so. You can look it up. I'm not making this up. It's a research that I read about some time ago, which is why I'm not entirely clear on it. But this book, Suicide by Edouard Levé, it's a second point of view, which I've never read a book like that, ever. And there are no chapters to it. It just flows. It's meant to imitate a memory because it's the protagonist or the speaker, the narrator, recalling different memories associated with his friend that committed suicide and essentially his suicide, right? And I think it's very interesting because it's so many different aspects of the fictional friend's life blended into one, but it just reads seamlessly. I'll admit, some points of the book I was incredibly bored by. I just was. And others, they just fascinated me and drew me in. But also the way it's translated, I think is absolutely beautiful because usually in translated works, it's very simplistic, right? It's almost primitive in their translations based on my personal experience. But with this one, I feel like I don't speak French, so I wouldn't know exactly, but I have a feeling that it's been translated thoroughly because the lexicon utilized in the English version is great. It's good. It's on my list of words. What can I say? So that's what I liked about the book. But personally, and this is a heavy topic, suicide, but I don't agree with the general perspective. And obviously taking into account any work of art is influenced by the author in a sense that any work of art is subjective, right? We're establishing this fact right now. And I think it's quite obvious, but let's just say it. Each and every work of art coming from a person is absolutely subjective in its entirety. And so with the author, I feel like this book romanticizes suicide. I feel like this novel romanticizes suicide, and I'll say it again. I feel like it does. But then taking into account the fact that the author committed a week after handing the manuscript to his publisher, it makes sense, right? But there's some phrases in it, like when he's speaking about his friend, he's like, yeah, so before you were alive, we liked you, but now we love you. Now you're the topic of every conversation. But it reminded me of 13 Reasons Why, which is a book and also a Netflix show. And I don't know, I just personally, once again, it's a heavy topic, I know, but I just don't agree with that. Because for example, 13 Reasons Why, if you watch the show, I didn't like that show. I watched the first season and I just stopped watching because it just, quite frankly, bored me. But Hannah Baker, she's dealing with a lot of heavy stuff and she commits suicide, and she sends tapes out to 13 people. And then you're like, you're my 8th reason why I committed, right? You're my 9th reason why I committed. And this book, it kind of promotes that idea in a sense that it doesn't blame people specifically for it, but it's kind of like the narrator, I'm just trying to convey my ideas clearly with clarity right now, but the narrator romanticizes his friend's suicide in a way. It's like, well, now you're a topic of a conversation, whatever. And I feel like Hannah Baker in 13 Reasons Why she did that. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to, and this is very straightforward and it's almost logical, this idea that I'm about to present to you, is that when you're dead, who cares who talks about you? Who cares? So with Hannah Baker, obviously it's not something I want to go too deep into, but once you're dead, you're dead. You can't hear any conversation spoken about you, So I don't think that should be the reason for anything. And I don't think suicide is something that should be glorified. Once again, this is a work of art, and I understand that, and I respect it. It's unlike anything I've ever read before, but I feel like it kind of glorifies it and romanticizes it in a way. But then again, if you put it into context with the horrific event that happened exactly a week after, you kind of tend to understand it more. But yeah, I don't agree with the general perspective of it, which is why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And also at some points, it just wasn't interesting to read. Then, 4th book I read is Stoner by John Williams, and that's honestly a beautiful novel for the most part. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And the genre of it, it's a campus novel. It's really a lot. I think the majority of it is about the campus university life, right? And the synopsis is that William Stoner was born at the end of the 19th century into a dirt poor Missouri farming family. He was sent to university to study agronomy, which I assume is like agriculture, soil stuff, to help his parents because he was going to come back after that. But instead, he fell in love with English literature and he started studying it, which is very unusual, obviously, because his parents haven't gone to university. I don't know about his grandparents, it wasn't mentioned, but I'm assuming they weren't as well because he's from a family of farmers, right? And it's said to be, in the introduction, to be a perfect novel. That's a very bold statement, a perfect novel. But after reading it, it is. It really is. The thing is, the manuscript for this book, it's so limited. There's not a whole lot of material to work with because think about it. Like, he's a farmer. He goes to university. He stays there for however long. He becomes a professor, blah, blah. Like, that's boring. Sorry. I apologize. But that's kind of boring stuff. You know what I mean? But John Williams, he does such a beautiful and eloquent job at just making it flow and making it interesting and almost exciting. I was excited to read that book because just of how beautifully it was written. The prose contained in that book is absolutely immaculate. Immaculate. And I'm being precise with my word choice right now. Beautiful, stunning, magnificent, fascinating, astounding. How many synonyms can I find for the word good? A lot. Why? Because I read literature. And also a fun fact about this book is that my dad, and he's listening to this podcast episode. He listens to everything, hopefully. My dad, he's not into literature at all. At all. Because he was like, why would I read literature? There's nonfiction, blah, blah. Literature is just a bunch of crap, right? Guess who's reading Stoner now? John Williams. Guess who just finished Stoner by John Williams? My dad. Why? Because I told him to read it. The word choice is really beautiful. And I think literature, if you're thinking about reading anything, literature is great for your lexicon, especially if you're reading good literature. And I'm going to go on a tangent about that a little bit later when I discuss my next book. But that book, also, I found it really funny. I love when authors do that. There's this sort of ruthless clarity with which some of the characters are presented. There's not a whole lot of characters in this novel, Stoner by John Williams. But the way they're described, it's just so funny. For example, the love interest that William Stoner meets, she's just described as she is. Obviously subjective from the point of the speaker, which is the third person omniscient. So I guess from the author. But I don't know, it's just so funny how ruthless it is. Because it's just like, she was shy, but not in the way that she was shy. She was blah, 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 blah. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you get the point. So I feel like those moments are really humorous when they're in a book. And also, what this novel brought up to me is that if you look, just as a general summary of William Stoner's life, it's pretty boring. He grows up on a farm, he goes to university, he stays there because he becomes a professor. Like, and I'm not going to spoil anything else. And then he has a failed marriage, which is in the description. I'm not spoiling anything. And then again, you have to take in this work of art as a whole. Am I allowing you to take in this work of art as a whole right now? No. Am I spoiling? No. I don't know why I made that sound, but it was funny. And if you look at the general summary of his life, like it's pretty boring, or it seems to be, just like, okay, he does these things, but then so what? But then I feel like the way it's written, it just makes you realize that that's not a bad life to live. Not at all. Is he stuck in the same place? Does he stay in the same place for 40 years? University, yes. Is that a bad way to live? No. So I feel like this book, I felt like when I was reading it, I felt like I was living a life of a person that I would never, ever get the experience to live ever in my life, not even upon having a conversation with them. So with this book, I was fully immersed in this fictional protagonist's life that's so dull and boring if you just think about it plainly. But if you really look into it, that's not a bad way to live. And I feel like that just added depth to my worldly perspective, if you will, because I think I started thinking about is that any person, and each and every person, they have such a unique life that they're living, shaped by their own unique experiences. And those experiences don't have to fall under my definition of exciting for it to be exciting to them. I don't know. Maybe it's just me over-romanticizing a very simple life, but I think it's not a bad way to live. And I think it's just interesting. So point is, if you want to experience another life of someone you probably will never get the opportunity to experience ever, just read Stoner by John Williams. Written beautifully. There's some questionable moments where, and this is a heavy topic as well, where William Stoner, he rapes his wife while she's sleeping, while he's overcome by his desire. And that's gross because it's a serious topic and it's just embedded in flowery language and it's just dismissed. So that's the only thing about this book that I didn't like, and that's a very light way to put it. It left me distraught, deeply uncomfortable, gross, disgusting. But it's a work of art and I respect it in its entirety. Last book I read, this one I'm about to go on a tangent. So Normal People by Sally Rooney, 2 out of 5 stars. I read the first page, right? And it's what's it called? It's a fictional romance novel and it's set in Ireland, which I found to be cool. Like that's a very cool aspect of it. But let me tell you this. So I have a second account, Secret Society. Secret Society, if you're part of it, you know. If you know, you know. And it's basically like a spam of sorts. But it's a secret society. And I mean that. So I read the first page of Normal People by Sally Rooney. And I don't have this book with me because I borrowed it from the library. And now I'm making my sister read it because I'm watching a show. And the show is just so beautiful. It's one of the best shows I think I've seen in my life. I love Black Mirror and I love Normal People on Hulu. Yeah, Normal People is on Hulu, Black Mirror is on Netflix. Watch those both. Normal People is so good. I got my whole family hooked on it. In fact, this evening, we'll be watching it. Because, okay, I'll just tell you right now. Read the book, hated it, 2 out of 5 stars, right? Then I started watching the show. Gosh, it's so slow moving, but it's beautiful. Cinematography, astounding. Acting, good. Actors, the cast, painfully beautiful. Storyline is just depicted more than it is in the book, which usually isn't the case, right? Because usually cinema, it kind of dumbs the book down. It makes it more shallow, sea level, kind of. I don't know. But with this one, it really added such depth. And I was watching it, and my sister came over from work, and my younger sister came over. So it was 2 of my sisters and my sister's boyfriend. And they're like, ugh, what are you watching? It sounds like boring, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's so boring. Why are you watching it? Guess who got hooked on it? Guess who I hooked on the show? Those 3. And we'll be watching it today evening. Thank you very much. Because it's just that good. So don't read the book. Watch the show. But that's my personal opinion. So regarding the book, if you have a fictional romance novel, do I read romance? No. Why did I decide to read this one? Because typically I don't ever read modern fiction, with the exception of Idiot by Elif Batuman. Trust me. It also has some romance in it, but it just brings up such important points. Idiot by Elif Batuman. The title is ironic. Dramatic irony or situational. I forget what the difference is. Anyway, so with this novel, I don't read romance at all, but I've been watching a lot of Steph Bohr's book videos, which is kind of why I got inspired to make this one. And I love hearing Steph Bohr talk about books. I don't know what it is, but it's just so satisfying. I love the way she talks about things and stuff and describes them. It draws me in. It fascinates me. And I listen and I watch every single video. Steph Bohr, I'm a fan. Just know that. I'm a fan. And Normal People, in her best books I've ever read or something like that video, she said that it's one of the best books she's ever read. She mentioned it. And so I was like, okay. And I've been hearing things about it. So I thought, why not? And I just ordered it from the library and it came sometime after. And I read it in one day. And my only motivation for continuing to read it was the fact that I wanted to finish the book. Because I like I said, I finish every book I start. And the first page I read, you know what I did? I went on a tangent. I went on a tangent with The Secret Society on my second account. The first one is at Vera Nothing. The second one was at Vera Something. But I didn't tell you that. I went on a tangent about good literature and how this isn't good literature. And I had to read one page to determine that. Thing is with literature, if you can already tell, I'm very particular and I'm very picky and I am very opinionated about things. And for me, like I said, words bear such importance and eloquence in a book. I can't read a book if it's not written well. Will I finish it? Yes. Will I be feeling like I'm in pain while I read it? While I finish it? Yes. But I'll finish it. So with this one, it didn't have quotation marks. It's very simplistic, borderline primitive writing, and I hate when it's like that. It reminds me of When We Were Liars by Lockhart. The storyline is beautiful. Just write it differently. Lockhart, ma'am, please. It was like that book, We Were Liars. I cried because it's obviously like it's a really good story, right? The plot twist is just it just took my heart and crushed it like a vampire or like somebody with superhuman strength, which I guess would be a vampire. I think vampires qualify. Anyway, but the way it's written, it was like, she was chocolate and he was honey. Her eyes were emeralds. Her skin was soft like tissue. Like, what is that? What is that? Sensory imagery, okay, but like, what is that? Gosh, I just don't like when it's like this. But once again, I'm biased. I'm very particular. Everything that comes out of my mouth is biased because it's coming from my brain, which automatically has a subjective filter on it. So keep that in mind. With this book, however, I had expectations and they were not fulfilled. It's simplistic. There's a lot of action on like page 12, I think. That was the first sex scene. And I was like, okay, I'm not used to this. After reading Fitzgerald where they take, I think, I don't know, half the book to kiss or like maybe peck. Gosh, I'm not used to this. So I just honestly, I have no problem with sex scenes incorporated into writing. Like there were some in Stoner. Taking apart the sexual assault, the rape, and there's some towards the end with that are consensual. Yeah, those are described beautifully because the whole book is written very eloquently and beautifully, right? But here it just felt like a cheap way to keep the reader's attention in. But then again, I'm biased, so I feel like maybe it was some sort of I guess it's just the modern aspect of writing because right now. Information, it's not exactly flowery, right? You go anywhere. You go on Google, you search up how many years do orcas live, and you get the answer in 3 seconds. So I guess it was just maybe very modernly down to the point, but I just didn't like that. It just felt cheap. You know what I mean? So that's the thing with that book. But also, I think with that book, what's also I found interesting is that it really flowed seamlessly at some points. Some that just felt dragged, but at some point it just flowed. But then again, Sally Rooney, what she did a really good job at is illustrating a very normal relationship, actually. It's called Normal People, right? And it's supposed to be like kind of a poke at that because they're not normal people. At the same time, I feel like it is. And that story, it's a romance between, gosh, let me remember the names. How do I not remember? I'm bad at names sometimes with fictional characters. Connell and Marianne. It's a romance between them. And thing is, they have so much miscommunication in between, it really drives you nuts. It does. But then I think that's what really is beautiful about this specific affair. How imperfectly normal this relationship is. Because if you think about just real life, right, and you just completely disregard the media and about how Prince Charming on a white horse sweeps in at the very end of the movie and says, "You're the love of my life, Mary. Please never leave me. I see you. I want to see you for the rest of my life, Mary." I don't know. I'm bad at improvising love monologues on the spot. Sorry. That's a fault I have. But if you take that aside, in real life, it's very normal for people to miscommunicate. And it's very normal for people to not clarify exactly what they mean or what the intent is, and for things to go completely wrong, and for people not to have a happy ending, or for people to have a happy ending. I'm not telling you how this book ends because I'm not spoiling anything, right? So I feel like this is very normal. And then again, this show just does a beautiful, beautiful job at illustrating this perfectly. I love the show. I'm going to have to rewatch it, and I will rewatch it because the cinematography is astounding. And obviously I pay great attention to cinematography because, well, I create content. I film all the time. And it's just beautiful. The colors are good. The actors are... Don't get me started about Connell. The actor is dating Phoebe Bridgers right now, which I think is kind of cool. I don't know, it's random. Why did I mention that? I don't know. It's very random. But point is, watch that Hulu show, read the book. You're probably going to finish it fast. It's 283 or 287 pages. Very short. I just didn't like the writing in it, and writing is of great importance to me. But yes, so regarding reading, read, y'all. Read, expand your horizons. And I think, obviously, I'm very opinionated on things, and I used to not understand why people would read romance novels that are kind of like cotton candy for the brain, you know? But then again, I think reading anything is better than not reading, because you're still consuming that information. But if you take anything away from this video, challenge yourself with your reading. That's how you expand your lexicon. That's how you gain new ideas about the world that you live in, or about, I don't know, you just get a newfound depth of perspective on people or your current life. You do so by reading works that expand your mind and expand your horizons. So Suicide by Edouard Levé. I've had it on my reading list for years. I think it actually has been a year. But I never got to it, and now I have. And it's such a weird work of art, but it's so beautiful in its originality. And one thing that I did get out of that book is the song High Crimson, Red Crimson. I don't know. I Talk to the Wind. God, that's a beautiful song. So anyway, this concludes my book video, my first book video. Here, may I present to you my fake prop books? Here they are. Here they are. The other reason I may ever own a book is because my mom buys them for me sometimes. I don't even ask. She just buys me like random books she thinks I would like, and I think it's so cool. So yeah, love you, Mom. I know she's also watching this. Anyway, thank you for listening. Go out and read. Expand your horizons. It's going to inspire something else, right? Especially if you do creative work. Reading is essential. Reading is a must. And before you go, recommend a book to me right now. If you watch the end of this video, comment a book right now. Comment it. Comment it right now. Okay, can't wait to hear. Bye. Bye. Toodles. Love you. Cheerio, governor.